Hi everyone, it's Renee. I recently had a beautiful conversation with Jen Coyne, CEO of the Peak Fleet, about what it really means to thrive as leaders in uncertain times. Jen reminded me that thriving is not a solo act. It's rooted in authenticity, in our values, and in creating the conditions for others to thrive with us. I am really excited to share this conversation with you, and I hope it sparks even a little moment of reflection on how you're living and leading today. Thanks so much. When we had our first conversation, it was just such a treat to meet you. It's always fun to meet people who you feel such a kindred spirit with.
Absolutely.
And before I dive into some questions that I want to ask you, I wonder if you could share a little bit about your
Yeah.
story and how you came to do the work you do as CEO of the Peak Fleet and as podcast host for Authenticity Matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I'll try to keep it a little bit brief because I could go on for a long time. But my background was originally in finance and accounting, and then I got into high tech and ended up, cut to over the course of, 20, 25 years, ended up doing a lot of work around the employee experience and user experience. And you can't, that brings humanity into it. I had already been really interested in leadership development and organizational development prior to that. And so that all kind of converged in one of my last roles in high tech. And so when I left that environment, that corporate environment, I really wanted to continue doing that human-centered work.
Mhm.
And so with the Peak Fleet, we are a boutique organizational development company. Our name is based on our values of persistence, empathy, authenticity, and kindness.
Mm.
And those are the things that we bring in. We bring in ourselves to all the work that we do. But we've found that there's sort of some fundamental truths about those values that resonate with a lot of people. And so that has brought us to doing a lot more work around values specifically in helping people and organizations discover their core values and then living that, right? Not just being platitudes or some words on a wall or something like that, but really how do you integrate that into your life and into your organization to live authentically, to work authentically, and to have more deepness and meaning in what we do.
Mhm.
So that was kind of the journey there to the Peak Fleet and the work that we do. We help with leadership development, with organizational development, all those things. And then about 6 years ago, after doing radio interviews and things like that for the Peak Fleet, got a little bit of a bug to do some of this myself. Connected with KXRW Radio here in the Vancouver, Washington, which is Portland metro area. And for the past 6 years have had Authenticity Matters as a radio show where I interview, people who have been on a journey to find their authentic path, to stand up to those fears, to stand up to the frictions that you encounter and that kind of prevent you from being authentic,
Mhm.
and give people tips, right? The whole goal is to help inspire others to find their values and live authentically.
Fantastic. Well, I love that first off, I didn't know up until now that your name of your business was the acronym of the
Yeah.
values that you
Yeah.
stand for, which that's really beautiful, actually. I love
Yeah.
that. It's elegant. And, but I also love that you are not only living the work and doing the work, but you're broadcasting the work.
Yeah.
You're really trying to what we often say, create a world where everyone can thrive, and that means
Yes.
just not that means living it. It means embodying it within teams and organizations and communities. And it also means kind of using your own platform, however big or small that platform is, to inspire and help others embody that as well. So it sounds like
Yeah.
you're doing some fabulous work.
Thank you. I'm definitely inspired.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Well, in that context, our world, as you and I talked about when we met, is in a major disruption, changes. I mean, there's really not a sector or a
Right.
slice of life that is nailed down any
Yeah.
longer. Everything is sort of up, and it seems like there's so much change and disruption happening.
Yeah.
What do you believe it means to thrive as human beings on this planet in this period of our world?
Right. That's a great question. You know, for me, it is about being able to connect in meaningful ways with other people,
Mm-hmm.
creating community, right? So that could be your locality, it could be, your local community in person, it could be creating community with those that you have common values or common passions, common interests. I know that, I have some hobbies that create that community and being able to, interact with that. Um, Being able to have the right abundance of resources available so that you can live that fulfilling life, meet your goals, live your dreams, while at the same time providing aid and making sure that you're sharing, right, with others. And so it is sort of countercultural to our capitalistic winner takes all kind of mentality, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's hard. I don't think that me as a human that I can thrive unless others thrive, right? So that has to be a component of thriving. It's not a zero sum game for me. It is about lifting everyone
Mm.
up.
Can you say a little more about right abundance? It strikes me that right abundance, the way you even said the word, I hear people say abundance a lot. But you
Yeah.
use right abundance,
Right sized abundance,
right
maybe.
size abundance. Yeah. So
Yeah.
the way you say that gets me really curious. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. I think that, you know, we live in a place right now where it seems like it's a very consumer driven mentality,
Mhm.
and there's it's really hard for people to feel like they are enough. And how can you feel like you are enough if you can never acquire enough?
Mhm.
Enough money, enough, properties, enough real estate, right? Enough employees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like
Enough
what?
likes, enough likes, enough on
Yeah.
social media.
So, I really I kind of made note of this when I was thinking about this interview is like there's kind of the cheeky question of like, should billionaires exist? And I
Mhm.
don't mean like getting rid of the lives of the people that find themselves to be fortunate enough to be billionaires right now, or unfortunate, depending on your perspective on it. But should people really consume and accumulate that amount of abundance
Mm.
when others struggle so deeply?
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I get to when I say right sized. It's like I feel like you can, just like you can, gluttony, right? I'm not a deeply religious person, but we were recently looking at what are the seven deadly sins.
Mhm.
Gluttony is one of them, right? And so gluttony can be a metaphor for overconsumption of anything,
Mhm.
right? Grabbing too much power, grabbing too much wealth, right? It's kind of gross at some point, especially when you aren't sharing that abundance with others. And so that's why I feel like I don't believe that the people that can never have enough actually are thriving,
Mhm.
because I think that they are never satisfied. And there has to be the right balance of like wanting to make a difference and pursue goals and create. I want to create every day, right? I love creating things. Um, so creating, feeling that passion to create, like, I'm a glass artist too. And there was a point where I was like creating art for myself. And then it was like, ooh, like I have to start selling this or giving it away or something, because I've created a bunch of stuff that is just for me. Like, why? it should be, it's sharing it in community. It's sharing it with other people that gives you satisfaction and helps you thrive.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you even talk about being a glass artist, it seems like for you at least, creating a lot at some point um, triggers you to say, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Kind of, why am I doing this? What is the deeper purpose here?
Hmm.
Why am I doing this? Because at some point for you, and I'm saying for you because for some other
Yeah,
person it might be a different experience.
for sure.
For you, it's not as satisfying. It's not as fulfilling.
It's not as satisfying if I'm completely doing it on my own. So for me, thriving has to be about connection, has to be about community.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of, research. If you look at research that Brene Brown has done and lots of other
Sure.
people have done, that, you know, humans thrive in connection with others. And so anything that is impeding that ability to connect, right, is going to cause a problem in some way. And I think that pursuing something for the sake of it, to, if you collect every, whatever hobby you have, that you're collecting things, if you have the best of something, what does it matter if you don't share it with other people? Who, there is something about measure a yardstick that other people are like, oh, that's really cool, and that you can share that with me. That's
Yeah.
why we have museums and things like that, because we're trying to open things up for other people to experience it too.
Hmm. So, what would right-sized abundance mean for an organization? So, you have an executive team that you're working with, and you're doing work with them to help them get clear about their values. And maybe they don't say right-sized abundance
Right.
that way, but they may say a word,
Hmm.
reciprocity or generosity or something that they want to be built into their business, not just the culture,
Right.
how the business
So
works.
I'm going to say a really dirty word now, and that is equity.
Okay.
I do believe that we're better if we're inclusive. I
Mhm.
do believe that we're better if we bring lots of different perspectives to the table. I think in the long run, that's better for an organization. And I do think to be inclusive and to bring those perspectives to the table, you have to offer up an equitable scenario for people. And so that plays in a little bit to that right size abundance when you think about what is the ratio of pay from a CEO down to the lowest level employees that you have,
Mhm.
right? If your ratio is like in the triple digits, that is a problem in my mind. Like
Mhm.
what justifies that to being the case? Especially if you have a situation where people who are working in your organization really struggle to make ends meet,
Mhm.
right? There should be, I do a lot of um, work within programs where we're looking a lot at the median income that people make,
Mhm.
and how many people are living in, 80% or lower than the median average of people's, income. It's significant, right? So many people are living in low income situations, and that is a byproduct of the opportunities that are available for people. I don't think that most people want to be productive. Most people want to go and do a good job at work, and they're not trying to sabotage. They're not trying to be lazy, right? They want to go and do a good job and be compensated appropriately for it. And I don't think that is in abundance in our country right now. I think the wealth disparities are becoming more and more significant.
Yeah, they not only are, you can see all the Gallup research kind of shows, bears that out.
Yeah,
And it's highly linked to our well-being, drops in our well-being,
100%.
as a nation, and I think that's a kind of a correlation they've been able to track all around the world too. So it's not
For
just in the U.S., but everywhere in the
absolutely.
world where you have this wealth gap grow, it
Yeah.
affects our well-being.
And I really wonder what the end game is for
Yeah.
people that are in positions of power and wealth to accumulate and concentrate that even more. Is what is the end game? Is it like living in gated communities with, you know, indentured servants? Like, I don't know what the end game is for in their mind of why you would continue to exponentially increase that wealth gap
Yeah.
within a company, or within a country. It doesn't end well historically.
Yeah. And it gets back to your question of you as someone who works with glass.
Hmm.
Why?
Right.
What's the point
Purpose. What
of
is Yeah.
what's
I
the
think,
purpose of this?
you know, I think there's been a lot of I don't know if it's like debates, but in my mind, there's this debate around, purpose and what does it mean to have purpose in your life. Um, and if someone can't define what their purpose is, are they on the wrong path? And because it's kind of that whole thing like find something that you love and you'll never work another day in your life, right? Like,
Hmm.
does your job have to have tremendous purpose and meaning for you personally? And I think it's weird because it's like yes and no, in the sense that I don't think someone's job has to be like, I mean, even the work I do, it's like it's tax season. I'm not like thrilled about any of that, even though I'm a CPA, right? I'm not thrilled about administrative aspects of the business, but it's part of it, right? So everybody has jobs they don't like to do. It's not, bringing me joy every day. But I think that when things are in harmony, then you're making enough money to pay your bills. You're not in a scarcity mindset. You're not worried about that all the time. And part of the purpose is providing for my family, right? Being able to do the hobbies, being able to do glass work as a hobby business is like important to me. How do I fit that in with everything else? I have to have the means to go buy raw materials, things like that, right? So, you can draw the lines of connection back to your day job, so to speak. That doesn't mean that your day job has to just bring everything for you.
Hmm.
It's not your full identity. And I do think that, as a slight tangent, like, we have too much fixation on our jobs being our identity, and I fell prey to that in being in corporate environments before the peak fleet.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things I want to draw out and just make
Mhm.
like almost like double click on or say, okay, you've said these things, and
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you what else, like what else you've been thinking about.
Yeah.
So, with the idea of how do we thrive as human beings on this planet, and with the question, what ways of leading may be emerging,
Right.
we talked about a couple of things. One is this idea of right-sized abundance.
Mm-hmm.
What I heard in your comments, although you didn't say these words, is not only is it about equity, but I also heard you really have to think systemically
Yeah.
because you have to be able to look at the whole system. Because the example you gave is if the CEO is making in the triple digits more than the lowest paid person, this is a
Yeah.
problem. But that meant you looked at the whole system to
Yeah.
see what was happening
Mm-hmm.
so that you could make that judgment call. So
Yeah.
that was one of the tracks we went down. The other is then purpose and the importance of purpose, but that your job doesn't need to give you everything.
Yeah.
But it's part of a bigger, deeper question of, what brings you joy in life. That could
Mm-hmm.
be work, that could be family, that could be hobbies, that could be whatever.
Yeah.
Could be reading, could be whatever it is for that particular person.
Yeah.
Um, and then the third piece that you just at the tail end so far you mentioned is identity and not
Mm-hmm.
getting too fixated on, which I think is awesome, by the way, not getting too fixated on the story of you being so hyperlinked with the story of your organization.
Yeah.
There may be phases in our career where that happens, and that's a really good thing to our thriving.
Yeah.
But then there's other phases where it's great to have I know I've been learning this for myself as well as, as the founder, one of the founders of Wisdom Works. It was very hooked to my identity. And now I'm
Yeah.
where it's such an important avenue for creative expression for me.
Yeah.
There's more of me, more to me than
Yeah.
just Wisdom Works. So,
Yeah.
having a healthy relationship with your work instead of being so overly identified with your work.
100%. Because I
Are there,
think, I found back in when I worked in high tech, people say, "What do you do?" And I would say, "I work at X place."
yeah,
Right? And wait a minute, like so who am I without that, right? And then so many people, we look at the perpetual environment we're in where people are losing their jobs suddenly,
right.
right? And then it becomes an existential crisis in addition to being maybe a monetary crisis or whatever for people, because they're like, who am I without this?
This job. Yeah.
Yeah.
This organization. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's important for you to establish a really good foundation of who you are and what that means to you, um, absent of a particular thing having to be there, because there's uncertainty and change all the time. So each one of those elements could go away, but you still remain.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to get down to a more atomic level about what that means to be
Hmm.
owning
You.
your own company, right? So for Peak Fleet, it's like if Peak Fleet went away, what is it about Peak Fleet that contributes to my identity?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
I could say the same thing about, I think, almost every facet of our lives. We could say the same thing.
Hmm.
Some people are very identified with their family. Well, who
Right.
am I without this family or this legacy?
Yeah.
Who am I without this organization? Who am I? So
Hmm.
it's a real, some very fundamental questions about what enables me to thrive. Who am I? What enables me to thrive? How do I show up well, no
Yeah.
matter what situation I'm in, whatever
Yeah.
context or circumstance I'm in?
Yeah.
So, when we talked a few weeks ago, you also talked a lot about, and I'd love to bring it in here, about authenticity
Yeah.
and walking your talk and how important
Hmm.
it's like really knowing your own values. And I think that's part of this who am I conversation.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you could say a little more about that, because I think that's just that this is also when I think about what are the qualities and skills that are really going to support us in thriving in the
Yeah.
middle of all this uncertainty, which again, I believe we've always been in uncertainty,
Yes,
but it just feels so in our face right now.
it does. As a side note, and then I'll come back to your question about authenticity, you know, especially in this country, we talk a lot about freedom and
Hmm.
how that's like the supreme,
Value.
fundamental and
Mhm.
value of our country. But when you look at how people act as if they want certainty, not freedom, right?
Mhm.
Because they're willing to give up a lot of, to live within confines of rules and regulations and responsibilities and getting a mortgage and getting this and getting that in their life so that they can feel more secure, protected, etc.
Mhm.
And so that's where I really ask people to dig into, what do you value? Because if 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 it's not about just being able to do what you want in your life,
Mhm.
right? Authenticity means being able to be you. That's what I hear often when I interview people, right? Being able to be yourself. It's like, well, what is being yourself, right? I think we can very easily get caught up in things. We're indoctrinated into lots of things in society, patterns of behavior,
Mhm.
right? That if you don't question it, are you really acting fundamentally in your own authenticity? And what does that mean to you?
Mhm.
So when I think about authenticity, what are the components of who is an authentic, what is your authentic self?
Mhm.
And I've taught classes about like defining and living an authentic life. And so it's like, how do you systematize it or create a framework for people to think about that?
Mhm.
And there's kind of three main things that I think about. One is what are your core values, right? Understanding how you want to act, how you want to make decisions. That's a fundamental component. The second component is your inherent or earned skills, right? So what are you good at?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that could be through the acquisition of education, things like that, or through your work experience or volunteer experience, whatever that is, you've got skills, right? And then the third piece is your passions, right? Like what really fires you up, what really gets you going, right? When I look at colors and light, like when I think about being a glass artist, like that, it inspires me.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about the work that I do, or, it's kind of meta, right? Like thinking about authenticity being something that fuels my authenticity, being able to talk to people about their stories and
Mm-hmm.
learn more about people. Excuse me. That is, a huge passion point for me. So those components, and then the other sort of vector on that is there are different areas of your life that you can assess how your values, passions, and talents play into that. So it could be wellness, it could be family, it could be love. Those things kind of go together sometimes. It could be work, right? It could be your extra, spare time, right? How many of us get caught up just like binge watching stuff on Netflix? Is
Mm-hmm.
that like really fulfilling ourselves in that extra time that we have available? So if you look at these different aspects, like looking at them as like a fuel gauge, how
Mm-hmm.
full is the fuel gauge versus what you want it to be?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if you can evaluate those things, you can kind of find the sweet spots for who you are, what you want to do, and how you're going to go about doing that.
And possibly how you might grow,
For sure.
because you might find areas where you say, okay, yeah, binge watching, maybe that's not fitting. Maybe I
Yeah,
can use that time a little better, or maybe it does. You know,
right. And
maybe
I feel like it's also okay to binge watch TV.
yeah.
Like if that's your
Yeah.
thing, if that is, but I think it boils down to intentionality,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we are just doing things reflexively. I mean, I'm, a somewhat politically active person. I have not been buying anything on Amazon now for, I think I'm going on 7 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
No Amazon purchases, right? That was intentional,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when I look back, it's like it's almost like unintentional that I got into the habit of I need something, I'll just go there, it'll be on my doorstep the next morning, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you get caught up in things and then you aren't thinking about what kind of an ecosystem or what are you contributing to at that systemic level versus me going down to my small business local shop and getting some of those things and supporting my local community,
Yeah.
right?
So when you're working with leaders, with people of,
Hmm.
of all types,
Right.
what are you hearing? What are some common values that you hear from people when
Hmm.
people really do the work? Because I think that what you're talking about, and that we do similar, related work,
Yeah.
it can sound very, when you talk about it, like this is easy. And I don't
Yeah.
think this is easy work. I
It
really
is not. It is
this is
not.
this is really about um, knowing yourself in a
Yeah.
deep way and defining yourself instead of having the world define you, or the inner voices, outer voices or inner voices, either one of
Yeah.
that set of voices. Defining there's some other self of you that can witness all of
Hmm.
that and can say, hold on, what do I believe? What are my values?
Right.
So
Right.
I think this is really a path of self-learning, and I think it's a lifetime path. I mean, and can change. Your answer can change.
Yes.
But I'm wondering what you hear are some really common values for people.
Yeah. So I do think it's a journey. I've started referring to it as a journey as opposed to a destination, right? Um, and so when we do values exercises with thousands of people, and when it's a personal, when you're personally, right? Because one of the things we do is you have to understand your own personal core values
Mhm.
to understand how they relate to an organization that you're working with, right? And so uh, on a personal level, family is number one. Of number one in what people select,
Mhm.
right?
Family.
So that, and it could be chosen family, it could be, you know, the born family.
Mhm.
Um, and the importance of that. That's something that's really, really high on people. Security is high for people.
Mhm.
Um, things like community, collaboration, curiosity.
Mhm.
Those are come up really, really often. Um, in organizations, the things that we see, again, interestingly, like that inclusion aspect comes up a lot.
Mhm.
Innovation comes up a tremendous amount, and some sort of an aspect around service,
Mhm.
right? Service to the community, service to our customers, things like that.
Mhm.
Um, see really, really often as a theme that comes up. Um, the other thing I want to add is like the current prevailing research that I've seen, and anecdotally, I'm like, yeah, this tracks for me, is that 90% of organizations have stated values,
Mhm.
right? It's a very high number. Like people got the assignment that they needed to state what their values were when they started an organization,
Mhm.
right? Um, Only 25%, though, of employees believe that they can apply those values every day at their work.
Mhm.
So that is representative of the hard work that you mentioned.
Mhm.
We've got to close the gap between that 25% and the 90% because there is a whole lot of employees that don't feel like it's it's actually happening and real in their organization that they're living those values. So
And
what's holding that back is the
well,
question.
that was my question for you. What do you find is holding that back?
Um, well, number one, I think if it was done in a purely performative way
Mhm.
to start with, right? If you went into it and said, "Oh, it's a thing now, we need to have values stated," and you have a session and you come up with the, 3 to 5 values that are most relevant for your organization and you publish them, and that's about it. That's the probably the number one contributor, is that there was never really an intention. It was somewhat, sometimes it's a reflection back of like, what is our culture and how do we act? And
Mhm.
then so that historical, if it's based on historically these are what our values are, then I think there's probably a higher percentage that it reflects true of what's actually happening in the organization. But more often than not, I would say that organizations act aspirationally when they define their values.
Mhm.
So they're like, we aren't here, but this is what we're supposed to be,
Yeah, this is or what we want to be, what we
what we
want to
want to
be.
be, what we think the outside world is demanding of us,
Mhm.
right? And not to harp on the DEI thing, but one of the reasons why I believe there's so much of an unwinding of that happening right now is because it was performative in the first place.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there wasn't a lot of action, or the actions that were taken didn't translate into enough of a fundamental systemic change in the organization. And so it's like, well, this is just a waste, right? That's not how we want to do things. So that can ring true for any of the values that you've selected, right? You have to do the work to understand how you operationalize it.
Mhm.
So I think of it in two columns, right? There's the processes and procedures and
Mhm.
operationalizing your values through those. And then there's the cultural interact, like how do we treat each other? What are the behavioral norms that we have that are sort of that social contract
Mm-hmm.
between us? What's acceptable in the workplace, right? And if somebody picks something like inclusion and then you go into meetings and there aren't any um, social norms that are having people draw you and everyone into the conversation, or if there aren't procedural practices where you round robin and make sure everyone has had their voice, right? These are simple things, but if you don't use them, then people can feel alienated or left out of the process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that can be true. Let's say we're talking about innovation. If it's all about just like cranking out and being productive and never having creative space to think about what are the next products and services that we want to offer and what is the next thing that we're going to do, that doesn't just happen all the time in the course of the day that like the light bulb appears, right? You have to have spare time in your day to brainstorm, right? And be creative. If that is not allowed,
Mm-hmm.
right? If that is not rewarded in any way, you're not going to get that outcome and then you're not going to see those values really materialize.
It's interesting because we've had such a high focus more recently, and I think not just recently, but for many decades on efficiency.
Yeah,
And yet efficiency is fine. I think it's a terrific value,
sure.
but it can be at cross purposes to innovation. If you want people to
Yep.
be creative and to think out of the box and all of that, but they feel so narrowed into
Right.
is efficient here.
Exactly.
And that's an example of what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
It really strikes me that the word I would use for this process, this developmental journey of moving from getting clear about my values to really demonstrating them,
Yeah.
whether that's me, the person, me, the team, me, the
Mhm.
organization, no matter what level,
Yeah.
is embodiment.
Mhm.
Is how do you really embody this? Like, how do
Yep.
you really embody it? And we know with any mindset or behavior change, that's a road. That's not
Yeah.
a one time, you do something once and now you've made a change.
Right.
Sometimes that does happen, by the way. I have done some coaching work with clients. They get clear about something and all of a sudden everything's different.
Right.
But that's rare.
It's rare.
Usually, it's very rare. Usually it's an over time process of new behaviors, new structures, new processes, and eventually a new identity, like your
Yeah.
new way of valuing and evaluating yourself.
Yeah. I
So,
think we're so hard on ourselves too that we end up, giving up. And, I use the analogy of like, I heard somebody on a YouTube video talking about quitting smoking. And they were like, I've tried doing this so many times. And the difference that they said that they had this time was that they weren't they weren't trying to beat themselves up about not going cold turkey,
mhm,
right? And they're like, if I have one today versus 20, that's good, right? That's still a good day. That's progress. And I think that we lose our momentum on things so much and then we give up and we move on to the next thing, whether that is in an organization, right? We're like, well, we tried that. And it didn't work, right? And then they turn their back on it and never go back to it. And somebody else goes, well, what about this? Well, we'd done that before and it didn't work, right? So you've got to come up with something that's one of the reasons why persistence is one of our values,
mhm,
because I do think you need that resilience, that tenacity, that perseverance, whatever word really rings true for you in life and in work. It really has to be there. But also, I think about these different values in balance or harmony with one another.
mhm,
And for peak, we often depict it as like an atomic symbol that it's like held together in tension, right?
mhm,
Because my authenticity and pursuing authenticity has a diminishing return, especially if I don't have empathy. And
Mm.
I actually think that's a big problem that, we're seeing a lot of people not demonstrating the skill and the competency of empathy or the value of it. Um, and and then actually being outspoken that it doesn't matter, right? And I think that there has to be a balance between you're allowed to be authentic and I believe your truth just as much as I have the right or desire to be authentic myself,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I'm really glad you brought that up because we're nearing the end of
Mhm.
our conversation,
Yeah.
but we've talked about a lot, and I wanted to ask you if there was anything else
Yes.
you wanted to make sure we covered that would support us to thrive in this
Yeah.
time of disruption and uncertainty. And empathy is huge. I mean, the
Yes.
ability to, especially in the middle of, it's funny because you and I have already talked about, we've always been in uncertainty. Really, we've
Yes.
always been in
Hmm.
uncertainty. And there's some part of us, we know from all of our work and our research through Wisdom Works, that having a sense of wonder and curiosity,
Yeah.
that's all about uncertainty. It's all about
Yep.
seeking it and, moving into it. So there's part of us that actually enjoys uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when we come from a place of fear around
Hmm.
uncertainty, it's easy to contract and
Yeah.
really start to protect and defend, what's mine,
Hmm.
our own, what's our tribes, what's our companies, what's our,
Right.
and think in a very small, contracted way.
Right.
So empathy to me is a great antidote
Absolutely.
to be like kind of extending back out again and trying
Yeah.
to put ourselves in others' shoes,
Right.
and
And
understand the
and I
consequences.
yeah, 100% agree. And I think that, you know, people are good at empathy if they're good at sympathy and they're good at identifying with people's experiences if that experience has affected them in some way. Where people don't do the work, and I think this is where we need to do the work, is number one, to believe other people's stories,
Hmm.
right? People are so skeptical about everyone's experiences now because we've eroded our ability of what facts and truth are. So you have to give people the benefit of the doubt that their experience is a real experience for them,
Hmm.
right? And then have the curiosity to understand why that's their experience and how it may differ for you. Um, I think that people need to be better perspective takers. So to not have had that personal experience, but to be able to imagine, right? Get creative and get, we were so good as children in like dreaming up, right? And play and having scenarios. Use those types of things to perspective take what might be possible or like why someone is experiencing what they're experiencing and how
Hmm.
that might feel like, wow, that hasn't happened to me, but if it did, this is how I might feel,
Hmm.
right? So that you don't have to say, well, I have a sister or I have a daughter, so I understand women's experiences or whatever. It's like, well, just imagine if that happened to me, how would I feel about that? And
Right.
so I think that's the portion of empathy that really needs to be improved. When we talk about leader skills that really are needed in more abundance right now, um, being able to stand alone, being willing to stand alone,
Hmm.
right? That's the definition of a leader, but I think that there comes times where you need to stand up and say, I'm not doing that.
Hmm.
Or we are doing this anyway, right? Despite what the pressures are, we're doing this.
Hmm.
Challenging paradigms, um, and being willing to speak up to represent others, um, and having curiosity. I mean, I think there's really it can be obnoxious. I think because I that's why I like doing interviews. I like asking people lots of questions, right? But I think we've gotten into a very lack of curiosity kind of space a lot of times. And I think just asking somebody why do you think that? Why is that true for you?
Mhm.
Right? How does that make you
Kind of
feel?
it's kind of simple
It's so
and
simple,
simple
right?
yet
And
not easy, you know?
I think we've gotten into a space where people think that they have to have all the answers. Curiosity is such an antidote to that, because if you just have curiosity, you don't have to have the answers.
Mhm.
You have to have the enough movement to go look it up, ask questions, ask people their perspectives. I don't have to be the lone genius. I do not have to, you know, we're very, very caught up in our self-importance, I think sometimes, and thinking that we have to have all the answers, and it's like we're just not really each that important. You know? In the scheme of history, if you really get that perspective and go back and look at the timeline for 100 years, 1,000 years, like we are specks of dust, blips in the universe. So why not live your truth? Why not be curious about the world around you? Because it is about you thriving in the life that you have, and making the most of it to contribute to this, all the specks of dust coming together.
Yeah. It's interesting because if you're living your truth and in the way you've talked about it when we started, if you're living your truth and you are thriving, you are naturally also including other people. You're
Yeah,
not thriving alone.
that's
You're thriving
absolutely.
the way that you are, how you are doing your life, however you're doing your
Yeah.
life, is also supporting others to do the same
Yeah.
and
We're
to
we're we're
thrive.
connected we're connected through the dirt below us,
Hmm.
and it's an ecosystem, and you have to have connection. So yeah, you summarize it perfectly.
Well, this has been a gift to talk to you. I really appreciate
Of course.
and everything you've said. I mean, it really, I can feel it in my chest, like a warm,
Yeah.
big yes.
Yeah.
And
And if I can make an ask, my
mhm,
ask is, we can help I can help people discover their values, but at the end of the day, I don't care how you do it. Discover your values. Think about the journey, and work to you know make intentional choices that support your values every day.
yeah,
Because no matter, if you're in we've talked about uncertainty this entire time. In uncertain times, you being grounded in your own values and what matters to you and how you want to treat other people, how you want to go about the world, that will always be there for you.
hmm,
When everything is changing around you, come back to your values. So, however you want to discover them, make sure that you do it and then live intentionally.